Wait, is there actually going to be like branding on the stream? Oh, hang on, hang on. There's no way. They actually added that in so that when they re-encode, it'll just put like a restream branding. No, it looks fine. I think it's fine. Let me check Trovo. Shut up.
Mobile live dashboard.
Yeah. Let me see. Okay, it's good. I was about to open the stream by like singing, and then I was like, okay, yeah, we got low latency and everything.
Your bitrate settings is out of recommended for Twitch.
Yeah, it is 6,000, less than 6,000. Whatever. What the heck ever? Am I right? Let me see if that shows up on stream properly. Oh, did I remove the stream stuff? There we go. We got some. Boy. Oh, goodness. I didn't have to start out by. I thought it was just gonna be fine. It just like, oh yeah, throw it up and everything. We got some issues apparently. Again, we see that certainty. Let me see. If I pull that up, is it gonna... Yeah, it cuts it off. We can't have it be cutting off. What's with that? Unlock it. Let me see it. Oh, is it being cut off by this? Let me try again. Oh, it's just because it's... We have to put that above everything. See, this is fine. This is fine. I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, it's been a long time since I've streamed. I really just I wanted to have this as a hobby, just do that on the side, have a bit of fun in it. Bit of fun in it. But I kept putting it off and just not. I wanted to make it special. I wanted to do a lot of special things, but it's just like, yeah, whatever. It's okay. It's fine. I don't know what this image says. I haven't asked the internet or anything. Come on. It's not difficult. Centered screen. There we go. Let me just test this thing once again. E. There we go. See, it's fine. See, I figured it out. I figured it out. It's fine. Again, we see this. Yep. There we go. So I was gonna do another one of the epic, funny discourse sections. The segment. It hasn't gone away. It's still here. Well, I mean, I've gone away. It's gone away with me. But is that my door just freaking out? I'll have to have the mute button on the ready. Anyhow, yes, the segment. That's what I was going to ADHD my way into. Segment is it's going to be back for just a little bit today. I want to quickly respond to Twitter because Twitter is just where you get the worst discourse possible. I want to maybe rationalize my position on some people. Here's my perspective really on Twitter is that it's not really much point to talking with people on there. There's not much point with trying to argue with people. There's no opinions to be changed. Because people are insane and they're not there to have their opinions changed. They're not there to have any sort of rational thought, rationalization going on. So best you can really do is if you've got a platform, or if you want to hope to have a platform, I don't know, you use them as an example to rationalize your own position, and then you move on, and then I don't know. It's just not the right platform to be responding to people on, because there's not enough that can be said in order to rationalize a position, and also that some people are just bad faith and they're not there to rationalize a position at all. So, um, we had a follower like a month ago. Did that do something? Oh, yeah, I had to hit the funny button. I forgot that I had that set as my thing. Yeah, probably some furry or something. Let me look. Let me see if they're a furry. I don't know, weeb, furry, something. Same thing, right? Just wanted to re-hit that. I think I had some bots. I don't know. It's funny looking in Streamlabs events and seeing like one thing from 5 months ago, one thing from 1 month ago, and then 1 year. Anyway, um, I had some like bots, it seems. But I was gonna be responding to some interesting takes on Twitter. I don't think because I've got like this. That's the wrong one. I don't know why this one exists. But I've got like this one. I didn't figure out how to get the chat to just stay there. I think I'd have to have like both chats in like separate windows, and then those would be able to stay there just fine. I'd have to have like Twitch and what. But I'm gonna put some more work into this when I actually get managed to uh, revamp this stream. But I'm just gonna be lazy about it now. Okay, get rid of the flopper. We're just gonna pop up on Twitter here. I wonder if there's a way for me to sort of show the yeah. Oh crap! People might be deleting stuff. I don't know. That looked a little funny. Oh, here. This is how we're gonna do it. We're gonna go this. Yeah. This is how we do this. Oh, that might have been a deleted tweet. Oh crap, we've moved stuff around. This is a disaster. Okay. That, and then that. And then the full thing. There we go. I think that might have been a deleted tweet that I wanted to respond to. I don't know if I had like a screenshot of it. But here we are. Goodness sake. Gotta get lubricated. Gotta get ready. Let's delete flopperooski.jpg. Get rid of that. Monitor 1. It better be monitor 1. That'd be really funny if it wasn't. Okay, there we go. We got the monitor up. So we start out with Elon Musk. If I had $1 every time someone asked me if Trump is coming back to this platform, Twitter would be minting money. Now, this is an interesting thing to say, obviously. He says he's the chief twit of Twitter, of course. It's funny, you know. Bit of a, what do you call it, investor activism thing that he's done, where he's bought up a ton of shares, came in and said, okay, we're going to change the way that this company is managed. And it is interesting to consider this. He says Twitter's would be minting money. It's an interesting remark, because he, as a chief investor, or just a large shareholder of this company, is going to want to, with his activism investment, be able to help them manage the company better. Otherwise, his investment has not been successful for him. So it's in his best interest to see Twitter be more profitable, which it hasn't been for a while, as far as I'm aware. I'm pretty sure they've got loads of debt. The stock price is a little bit up since he bought in. So I mean, he could probably sell for a profit. Well, actually, I don't think he legally can sell for a profit at this point. He would actually have to sink a little more eggs into that proverbial basket before he does something like that. But yeah, for sake of not rambling, we have to move on. We've got a reply from a funny account. How much money would you have if you had $1 for every time you ignored someone asking how you're going to deal with transphobia? Now, apparently this account has one of their moderators as a one of their moderators is a zoophile, which is, it makes it difficult to want to take someone like this seriously. Whenever they have a take, it's like, okay, you were ran by a zoophile. I don't know who I'm talking to right now. You might be talking to someone right now who is sexually attracted to animals. That's a little bit weird. That's murky territory. I don't know if I want to necessarily take this person seriously. Um, and I don't even know. Goodness sake, what have I got in my throat? Now, I don't necessarily know if that's true. I've seen screenshots saying that this is the person who has this account and that they've posted about being a no contact zoophile or something like that. And I don't. That frankly, that's not the topic that we're going to be talking about. um, this account has been constantly replying to Elon Musk, asking, "How are you going to deal with transphobia? How are you going to deal with transphobia?" Um, and the first thing that I have to say about that is that, he is coming from a freedom of speech standpoint. Freedom of speech is sort of universal. Just because it's speech you do not like doesn't mean that it should be banned if you're going purely from that perspective. So a lot of people on here will say stuff like, "Oh, just say you want the right to say slurs, say you want the right to be mean to minorities, and say you want the right to be racist." And it's my response to that is literally yes. Those things that you do, so long as they are within speech, are protected under freedom of speech. That is the point of freedom of speech. Is it includes especially speech that you dislike. So if people are being transphobic, if people are being whatever, then they absolutely have that right. And whether the platform wants to police people saying certain things, that's up to the platform to a certain degree. I don't think Twitter, with all of its ability to control the narrative, to control free speech, is really doing its due diligence as a corporation that hosts a lot of free speech. Many people have described it as the town hall of the internet, the town hall in the modern day, where you can go stand up on your soapbox and say whatever you want. Except you can't say whatever you want. You no longer really have that right, because a private corporation has decided that you can't say certain things that they deem unsavory. I don't think that line can be applied evenly. I don't think it is a consistent line that can be drawn. And I think people really lose themselves in this sort of dogma of people said things that I didn't like. They shouldn't have the right to say that. When you say it that way, and people don't really say it that way in particular. It's just particular stuff about, "Oh, you said a slur. I don't think people should have the right to say slurs. You said something transphobic. I don't think you should have the right to say something transphobic." That is not a consistent line that can be drawn. The most consistent line should be that people have the freedom of speech. People have the right to be rude. People have the right to be terrible people. It's not morally correct. Simply saying the fact that it is protected under the law does not make it morally correct. It is just a human right that they have. And in a different way, like, I guess you'd have to get really basic at this point in order to rationalize this. Why are certain things illegal? Let's say murder, for example. Murder, you are taking away someone's bodily right to autonomy. You're taking away their personal freedoms and any potential ability for them to do anything permanently. Obviously, you should not have the right to do something like that. That is a principle that can be applied evenly. But with this, it's like when someone is saying, "I don't think that a biological man can be a woman, can become a woman, at least with the current technology that we have today, then and you're going to say that's transphobic, you should not be allowed to say that. That is a fundamental trampling of someone else's freedoms, and I don't really stand for that. In the same way, see, it's interesting because I think a lot of these types of people will go out on a limb and just on this tirade, and they'll talk all about like, you're transphobe, you're racist, you should be able to do this. And it's like, if I can take away your fundamental human rights because you said something that I didn't like, that's not a line that is going to favor you. That's not a principle that is going to favor you in future. That is something that is going to come back and bite you in the bottom. It's the most British thing I've ever said on stream. Bite you in the bottom. Oh, yes, well, hello. We're going to bite you in the bottom. But I do think that it's a very serious thing that our general culture has become very focused on being very anti-freedom of speech in particular ways. I think there are consequences. You know, if somebody says a slur online and that causes them to lose their job, it's a sort of difficult line to draw, because there are some people who go out of their way to say, hey, this someone says something I don't like and that a lot of people don't like online, they should lose their job. And they go and they find their employer and they try to ruin their life over something that they said that they just found disagreeable or perhaps found absolutely vile. But I don't think that culture that is very anti-freedom of speech is going to serve us in the long run. I don't think it's going to serve people in general. I think it's going to end up creating a sort of culture of not being allowed to say really anything whatsoever. I am pro freedom of speech, whether you think that other people shouldn't be allowed to say certain things or not. I'm going to say, like, him, her, it, she. There are multiple people on the account, so I've got no idea. This account, the people running this account, they have the right to talk to him and say, hey, you should do this, hey, you should do this. This is absolutely their own right to be able to express this. But what they are advocating for is for other people to no longer have the same rights that they are employing. I don't think that is going to bode well for them in the long run. And I don't think it's going to bode well for anybody in the long run. Just some replies is just interesting. But I think my main takeaway from this comment is that I don't think he has any proof that he ignored anyone asking, because there's no proof that he even reads the replies other than that he's replied to people in the past. But I don't think, like, you are not entitled to his time, for one thing. But for another thing, people absolutely have the right to say things that you may deem transphobic, that you may deem morally incorrect. It's all about trying to convince people, trying to take people over to your side by convincing them, by rationalizing your own position. And if you can rationalize your position in the best way possible to anybody else about how you don't think that people should have a fundamental human right to say things that you personally find disagreeable, and to try and make that make sense, try and make that be a consistent line that can be drawn, that won't eventually end up coming back to you and saying, hey, you said something that offended someone else, should you have the right to say that? I don't think that's going to end well for you. So I think just in general, just because someone is saying something that you disagree doesn't mean that they shouldn't have that right taken away. And just because they have the right doesn't make it morally okay. There's a moral argument and there's a legal argument. I believe morally, and you know, that there's sort of a gray in between in that. But to clarify on my position, I think that no matter how vile something that someone says, it is protected under freedom of speech, whether you like it or not. And the consequences that they can receive from saying something vile that's sort of where the gray zone is. I just don't like that our culture is trying to police, not through legal means. In a lot of situations, I mean, there are plenty of places that do not have freedom of speech, aka anywhere other than the U.S. But there are people who try through non-legal means in the U.S. especially. It's a big cultural thing, at least on Twitter it is, that people just should not be able to say what they want to say because other people are offended by it. And I don't like that the culture has been turning that way, because if what is it? They wanted a king, and so they said, "Hey, you should make Saul the king." And then Saul ended up being the king, and he wasn't a great king, and he ended up doing a lot of bad things for them. I think that's essentially what this is. They are advocating for a policy that will eventually, uh, not really have good consequences for them. Um, so I think I'll leave it at that. I've tried to wrap this up for the last couple minutes. So we've got a reply here. It's called free speech. If transphobes stop being banned, then Elon would be no different than woman who banned Trump. I don't know what exactly he means by that. I also failed to mention calls to violence and what is it? Calls to action, calls to violence. Those are not protected under freedom of speech, obviously, because you are actively telling people to go and do something that is violent. That is not protected under freedom of speech, because that you will be held liable in most cases if you tell someone to cause physical harm to a person or entity or business, property, any of that. You will be held somewhat responsible for explicitly telling someone to do something like that. But if transphobes stop being banned, Elon will be no different than woman. I don't know who the woman who banned Trump is, but it's upon the principle. He's right on principle, I suppose. Um, you know, Trump getting banned. I mean, I don't know. What a lot of people would argue is that Trump was actively doing a lot of calls to violence, but I saw videos of him talking up until January 6th, in the January 6th incident, and he, in a lot of his promotional material for that, was explicitly saying, we're not going to be violent. We're not the party of violence. We're not going to do violent things. Violent is cringe, etc., etc. Okay. And I think that legally that exonerated him from any of the things that his gremlins did in that situation, which is, I believe. I mean, I didn't like listen to the court proceedings or anything like that, but I do believe that that is why he was exonerated, and I believe that that was a just thing. If you explicitly say, "Hey, we're all going to gather up in this specific place to protest this, or to say this, or to have this event, but we're not going to be violent. We're expressly not going to do any violent things." You've not only have you washed your hands of that, but you never really said anything in the first place. And people like to talk about like, "Oh, you're out there spewing vitriol. You're saying that people are bad," and that I don't know, saying that there are people who are really trying very difficult. What am I trying to say? There are people who are trying very, very hard to create an upset in the election. Which, I mean, I'm just assuming that that's what Trump said. I'm not going to pull up any of the videos or anything, and you can't find him on Twitter because he got banned from Twitter, obviously. I think Twitter was looking for excuses to ban him, and because there was a legal situation regarding that, then they just took that as an excuse and ran with it, because the people higher up at Twitter don't like him, and then it's as simple as that. And most people on Twitter don't like him. At least the vocal people don't really tend to like him. But then there was this reply. I don't know if it went away or what, but I had it loaded on this tab. So this person says, raping and killing trans people is free speech. I really got to start using the internet more. For one thing, you should probably stop using the internet, because this is really just not intelligent. The first thing is, find the person who said that, raping and killing people is not free speech because it's not speech at all. Like you did nothing with your vocal cords or with your fingers to type something on the internet to actually constitute that as speech. And you weren't talking to anyone. You were actually using your physical means. Through physical means, you uh, intentionally harmed someone in that situation. That is not free speech, and no one is saying it is free speech. This is possibly one of the worst bad faith. It's not even bad faith. This is just complete straw man. Because like, yes, if someone said this, they would be wrong. Um, but nobody said this, so you're really just reaching in a very bad faith way, very dishonest way. Um, and no one really. I'm guessing that this tweet got deleted. I don't know if you could still find these. See if it got deleted or anything. Maybe it's still up. I don't know. I don't know why it was being hidden in this reply, but um, it's it's kind of funny because in nowhere did anyone say that. That's the part that's just most. Well, I wouldn't call it troubling, but it's the most strange about this entire interaction. And of course, this is the
I
video.
mean, whatever, I guess.
Yeah, it's just kind of funny. It's like not only is anyone say not no one saying that in this, but I want you to find someone who actually thinks that because that's just absolutely ridiculous. Um, this is far and away. I think this is going to be my takeaway. If you want to bring people to your side, if you want to convince people, this is not the way to do it. By just inserting terrible things into their mouths and saying, "Oh, you think that's good? You think this? You think this?" And it's like, no, nobody said that. Reading comprehension is really just terrible. Like this is not the way to do it. I feel like this person is far more reasonable than this person. Um, at least judging off of what was said in this particular interaction rather. But it's just kind of interesting that that ends up happening, where it's like, no one is saying anything related, even remotely related to this, but you really punched the heck out of that straw man, my guy. Well, what's funny is that it didn't even say like anything to do. I completely lost my train of thought because I got distracted by this. One of the creators of Dogecoin. I don't like Donald Trump for many reasons, but the way people are acting like the literal world will end is if he allowed to make crappy tweets on Bird App again is kind of ridiculous too. Scrappy tweets make MAGA morons attack our capital. Government figures being attacked. A simple tweet message from Alex Jones made millions contact Sandy Hook parents and attack them. Words matter when intelligence is at its lowest. Hate needs to stay locked up. I would respond to that by saying, find me the tweet where he expressly said that people should go do X violent thing on January 6th. Find me the tweet where he said that. I'm sure they've got receipts and they've got people who archive that. Because it's funny because there is a video of him talking about January 6th where he said expressly, hey, I don't think that I kind of paraphrase with it. Listen, we can't be violent. We're not the party of violence. Violence is cringe, etc. He explicitly exonerated himself from that, and he was saying, "Oh, they're trying to steal the election, etc." That is not an express call to violence to say you guys should go storm the Capitol. That's not what that means. People can extrapolate that all they want, but it is on principle not something. Like what this person is trying to say is that effectively, whenever you say these people are trying to do this thing, that is not going to have good consequences, that you are effectively calling for people to take up arms against that person. Like for example, if you said, you're saying, hey, there's this birth clinic that is that does not give abortion as an option and is anti-abortion and will try to dissuade women from going there and having abortions. Well, women who go there from having abortions will try to say, hey, you shouldn't do that. There are other alternatives for you. Here we're going to give you whatever amount of care that you need to do whatever that is not that. You simply reporting on that is encouraging people to go firebomb the place. I don't think that that's true. And even if you're saying, hey, I don't really think that they should be conducting business that way, I would still protect your freedom of speech in saying that by, you are not actively calling for that business to be violently attacked. In the same way as he was saying, there are people trying to steal the election. There are people who are threatening our democracy. Whatever he was saying, I don't think by him saying that he is saying that we need to take up arms against it. And that is a principle that can be drawn, that will protect all people's rights in this situation. I also don't want to have to cater to the stupidest morons. People were looting and destroying property to show that we should defund the police too, and no one got deplatformed for that. There are a hell of a lot of stupid people on Earth. Well, that's the thing, especially if you say, don't be violent. Like, do not be violent, absolutely do not do anything to hurt other people. That does not help our cause. That does not help anybody. That's just going to be bad for people. I keep accidentally clicking on that. Then it's like, it's just like, charge $1 in Doge to a new Twitter coin to follow Trump. That solves the bot problem too, as people would need to pay. Would raise the discourse as well. Even $1 is enough to shut out most trolls. That's weird. No one should be permanently banned. I mean, I guess this is from a moral argument or a legal argument. Like, it would be really cool if every single platform out there specifically had terms of service that said, hey, you can post anything so long as it is not, you committing a crime, you being sexually explicit, or you having an active call to violence, which is actually a crime. I don't know, it'd be cool, but it's interesting. Anyway, I don't know if I'm gonna go through this one. I guess this one would probably take a long time, and I don't know if I'm necessarily not necessarily like in the mood to do this. I don't know. I guess I could look at it. Alt furries. I don't know what this is talking about. I don't know why I have that in a tab. Oh, there were people talking about white woman making art like this, selling prints of it at furry cons is the epitome of cultural appropriation, fetishization. I don't understand why we still put up with this. As an indigenous person, I agree that the representation of our culture at this point should be respected and only produced by indigenous peoples. I am tired of these artists fetishizing our clothing and culture. They both claim to be furries and just, quote, make furry art. Which culture is this fetishizing exactly? I find this discourse interesting, because people are saying, like, from a certain moral level, I do think it is relevant to say which culture is this fetishizing. They say which culture do you think? If you think all American Indian cultures are monolithic, then I somewhat doubt how seriously you take your Blackfoot heritage. So I don't know if, oh yeah, this person is like, I'm Blackfoot native in the title, but it is interesting where it's like, I don't know what this specifically is a fetishization of. I don't know. This is an interesting topic. I absolutely believe that under freedom of speech, freedom of expression, that people can draw whatever they want, of whatever they want, and that is protected under freedom of speech. I don't know if people are arguing that it should be illegal for them to do stuff like this, because this would be a little bit silly if it was a complete legal line to draw where there's like, you can only produce a representation of X culture if you are part of X culture, and you cannot, like, I don't know. I feel like that line is another freedom of speech, freedom of expression thing that will eventually come back back to these people and be like, well, and oh, I think the bigger thing is that, come on, it literally just came into my brain and left again. Nobody owns culture. Culture is not owned by anybody in any legal or even perhaps a moral sense. It's really difficult for you to say, hey, we own this style of clothing, necklace, whatever. We own this style of putting feathers in your on your head. Like, if I went out and said, okay, my culture is that I stream to the internet with a burger on my head, and every time of the year and around this time of the year I just say it's burger time, boys. And I was like, that's part of my culture and you can't take it away from me, and nobody else can do that without being it deemed uh morally terrible. If not, it should be illegal. I It's like, I don't know, they made up a cultural custom, it's really all cultural customs are made up at a certain point. They have a point of origin. They have this cultural custom that should only apply to this specific family or this specific group of people. Um, I don't know. I feel like what is conceptually different from that and Native American uh, particular cultural custom, garb, outfit, whatever, other than time, because it's like, oh, this is a historical thing. This was done like, where is the line drawn to where a culture begins and just a silly thing that one guy is doing uh, begins? Where is the line going to be drawn at that? Does it have to be around for 5 years? Does it have to be around for a couple generations of specific people being born into a family and continuing this custom? Does it have to be 50 years, 100 years? Where's the line drawn? I don't know if you can draw a line that can be consistently dealt with. I don't know if you could have a principled point about that, where it's like, you are not allowed to um, show to draw something of this nature that is related to this specific culture, that was invented or came about or developed or whatever, 500 specific. It has to be 500 years ago or older. And if you're not part of that culture, or if that culture no longer is, like, it's like, if you're not part of that culture, you can't do it. And if that culture no longer exists, then no one can do it. I don't. It's like, it's a little bit of a strange line to draw. Um, it's just random, like, Twitter memes. Um, but I understand this point as essentially like, there's nothing specific about this, as far as I or this person is aware, that specifically targets it as, is this Anasazi? Is this Lenny Lenape? Is this what is it? Um, what culture is this expressly from? Where is the fetishization aspect of this, etc. Um, and just because, just saying indigenous peoples, there are a whole lot of tribes. There are a whole host of them, with a myriad of different cultures and different customs and different outfits and different what have you. Um, and you're putting them all under this umbrella of indigenous peoples. If I am 1/16th Cherokee, am I only allowed to uh, make art, outfits, wear the outfits, present the art of only specifically Cherokee people? Or am I allowed to partake in other cultures who, at the time of those cultures' existence, probably wouldn't have gotten along in some situations, or perhaps they did get along, or whatever, but they were still separate cultures? How is it that there are so many people who are descendants of these tribes who assume that just because there are people who are descendants of other tribes, that they have that in common with them? It's kind of interesting, because it's like, I don't know, maybe today we've got people, I was born in Utah, I'm a native Utahn. There's someone who's born in Colorado, they're native Coloradan, out of whatever. It's like we all are under the umbrella of being American, but if there's a specific cultural custom in Utah that isn't had in Colorado, is that something that can pass between them? It's really interesting how people try to draw these moral lines um, between cultures and sort of try to claim them as their own when in reality I don't know it'd be interesting if you could go back in time and perhaps talk to people who were I don't know you have these tribal representatives of all of these different tribes and you say okay so there are people here in our time who are trying to say who are trying to wear your clothing use your customs uh and profit off of slash show your culture in a way that is obviously not your culture. I wonder if, assuming that they all were able to come together and speak the same language, assuming that language wasn't an issue because all of these different tribes, for the most part, had completely different languages and whatnot, assuming that you could communicate that effectively to them, um, I wonder what they would say because there were definitely mountain men who went around and that there were you know people who were coming around and creating settlements and whatnot who would trade barter and purchase things from native people native tribesmen and women I suppose that and they would be purchasing clothing if you look up any specific mountain man I don't know if they had paintings expressly painted of them, or if a lot of that ended up being put into sort of a folk culture of they had these rumors about this story that this specific mountain man went on this adventure where this thing happened that can't necessarily be corroborated. Like I don't know if all of those things were necessarily true, but if I remember correctly, I don't know if you just Jim images, if you just look up like Jim Bridger then you could probably. Oh yeah, that kind of looks. Maybe you can kind of see the. Like, is this a native outfit that he was wearing in that particular statue? And this is a depiction of him. Obviously, it's not like him himself, but these seem a little bit reminiscent of some native outfits, and I don't know what culture or specific native tribe that would necessarily have came from. But if you're out there and you need a new coat and it's winter and you're talking to the native tribes people over there and they're like, hey, we can give you this like this leather we can give you this whatever thing that we made if you give us some of your goods. And he's like, oh well, I'm a trapper, so I've got all of these pelts on him, so let's trade for that. And then he ends up wearing it because it has the utility of keeping him warm in the winter or what have you. Then is that a bad thing that he purchased something from the people whose culture it is to wear these specific types of outfits and whatnot? Like it's an interesting line when you go into historically. There are people who did not have these. I don't think anybody had these ideals back then of culture, and even if they did, I don't think that they would necessarily been right in in saying so. Even if like I don't know, because if I say it's American culture to eat a lot of McDonald's, and yet there are McDonald's worldwide, and yeah, I'd say you're appropriating my culture for eating McDonald's. It's like, why is that more ridiculous than saying that you shouldn't be allowed to draw certain beads when you're not a member of someone else's culture? But a lot of people are apparently trying to block this artist specifically. Uh, block. It's weird. It's weird to get cancelled drawing beads when white. I kind of agree with that take. And when people would rather block than try to explain to these people their position and rationalize their position on why they believe that what they are doing is incorrect, then I don't think that there's a lot of oh, this is a frame from Fantastic Mr. Fox. I hadn't watched this movie when I first stumbled upon this, so that was kind of interesting. Anyone griping about cultural appropriation is white and upper middle class. I mean, you don't necessarily know that, but it is interesting to see how many people make this point because I don't know what principle it necessarily like. Are you only allowed to get offended about people doing something that you think is harming another culture if you are part of that culture in the first place? I don't know. I don't know where exactly I stand on that. That's an interesting moral question, and I guess that is why we have these moral dives into these sort of things. It's not just beads. The print line was literally called Native Medicine Animals, and it was genuine native fetishizing, and none of us natives liked it. None of them? Like, there's not a single person who can claim that they have 1/6 blood Cherokee, one whatever. I had ancestors who were Lenni Lenape. Like, there's not a single person out of who were descendants of however many tribes, native tribes who used to be in the Americas, who was just like, yeah, I don't really care about that. There wasn't a single person. Is there a name for this? Like, is there a name for this sort of like? Is it a fallacy for you to say? Well, I guess the closest one is no true Scotsman. It's like, oh, if the every single person, like they're just drawing such a broad application of what they're trying to say. It's just like nobody thinks this. It's like, okay, calm down, stop being hyperbolic. It's not native fetishizing. Has the telltale trope of the two feathers behind the ears, no formal regalia or otherwise truthful traditional clothing. I'm not familiar with that myself, but tell me what. See, and it's funny because I mentioned this earlier. I said, oh, this is offending the culture of the people who put two feathers behind the ear, and then they literally said it. Telltale trope of two feathers behind the ears, no formal regalia, otherwise truthful traditional clothing. I don't understand how that's. Didn't call this Lakota fox a Sioux fox. He just did minimal generic tribal stuff you'd see common amongst North American, South American, and Druid or Mongol influenced places. So would it be correct if she did make it Celtic? Traditional Celtic headwear and dress? That's interesting. I don't have anything to say about that. But it is interesting that people would people be okay with it if she was extremely specific about it? It was just like, okay, so we've got this Sioux. It's not a fox. It's pretty obviously a wolf or a coyote. Actually, maybe it is a little ambiguous. Come to think of it, it's got perhaps the colors of a coyote. It looks a little foxy. I mean, wolfy though. Does not look foxy. That's not what foxes generally look like. It's canid. Let's call it canid. But if she had called it a Lakota fox and had it very truthful to traditional clothing, but as worn by Lakota tribe, the Sioux tribe, or whatever tribe it is, would people then be okay with it, or would people still be like, oh no, she's white, so she can't draw that? I don't think that people are going to be remarkably consistent about that. But like, is it okay for a writer who is not part of X culture to go in and write about someone who is part of that culture, even if they get details wrong? Or is it only correct if they do get the details wrong? Or if it's not correct, whether or not they do or don't get the details correct, it's still morally incorrect because they are not part of that culture and therefore cannot draw something or write a story about or XYZ about that particular culture. I don't know where people are going to draw the line, and I don't think I'm going to be able to get any sort of consistent principle drawn out of this. I don't think people are willing to really talk about this. Um, bigoted hate against you. Oh yeah, this is the original post. It's not bigotry. The indigenous furs in the community have literally asked her to stop. So anyone can go on the internet and claim that they are whatever that they're whatever amount they have ancestry in XYZ. Most of these people are all furries, and furries generally don't go under their actual given names. So, and even if they did, you would have to find specifically who those people are to be able to corroborate that they are actually they actually have natives in their ancestry. And people have done this for forever. It's not even a far cry to say that people have claimed that they are part of a culture that they're not actually part of. I don't, there are probably plenty of people who are fully just within American culture, whatever that may be. People have really bizarre thoughts about culture. If you were to say American culture, um, I could definitely see a lot of people scoffing about that. But you know, there are micro cultures that every family, every friend group has this particular culture, a particular little micro culture that isn't oftentimes just remains relative to that group itself. So it's funny that people just assume that culture is this very. I think people have a very limited view of what a culture is, and what culture is, what a culture is. I don't know. I see art with indigenous themes, but I don't see having significant meaning of actual indigenous people in their culture. Well, they had this symbol apparently here as a particular thing from a particular tribe. Maybe these particular beads or a particular thing for a particular tribe. But I don't think that anybody can necessarily claim that style. And even if there was some sort of legal way, I don't think people are arguing from legality. If people are saying, hey, this is my copyright, why are you drawing my... I mean, I don't know. You could probably consider that to be transformative anyway. And even if that was something that people were trying to claim, that a particular style was someone's intellectual property, then it's like those have long since expired, even if they were registered at one point or another. I don't think that's what people are arguing, so there's no point going down that road. So people calling it bigotry, indigenous furs in the community have literally asked it to stop. There's no way to prove that you are indigenous, and I'm not going to ask people to prove that they're indigenous, but it's interesting that people try to make it their point. It's like, hey, I've done this thing, and I've got this in my ancestry, so that gives me brownie points to be able to say XYZ thing about this situation. It's just I think people just take stuff like this too seriously. Isn't what's her name? There's a politician who was claiming to be a certain amount of some native tribe, and it was verified that she was lying the entire time, and she was white as can be. Who was that? Somebody. I don't know. I don't remember off the top of my head. I swear it's happened. You ask a white person to make art about people from other cultures. Following that logic, people from certain ethnic groups can only make art of the same groups, which is an inherently racist notion. We have freedom of speech. They asked her to stop. She has the freedom to say no. I agree with that. Teach children that this is not okay. Teach children that there's nothing wrong with this. I'm really not understanding why you think cultural appropriation would be okay unless you were assuming that the girl in the picture is part Japanese. I see. Is it possible that someone could be descended from someone by blood but not actually participate in the culture or really know anything about it? Is it cultural appropriation for me, who may or may not have ancestry that is Scottish, for me to dress up in a kilt and play the bagpipes? It's literally something that people have in my family have done as customs during funerals, actually. Like, if I have never been to that place, if I've never really participated in the culture other than that, like am I not allowed to do that despite me having blood? gone back through it. I don't know if people would necessarily make that argument, but I disagree. The makeup is clearly reflective of traditional geisha makeup, which is yellow face and therefore racist. What? Furthermore, the girl is wearing a kimono, a garment that has for ages carries cultural significance. Assuming that she is white, how can you think this is okay? And cultural appropriation isn't a thing. That's a very telling sentence. Assuming that she is white, how can you think this is okay? That is a very telling sentence. It's like, what are you trying to say? What are you trying to say with that statement? Like, it's a little bit weird. Cultural appropriation isn't a thing. What rock do you live under? I suggest you educate yourself on the differences between cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation. I am Japanese, in Japan this very moment. The only people who think culture shouldn't be shared are racists like you. A vast majority of Japanese people actually enjoy other people making an effort to spread and enjoy Japanese culture and encourage it. Many make businesses in deliberately taking pictures of people in kimono. A common oimagi gift for foreigners from Japanese people is traditional Japanese things such as kimonos, tea seats, shisa dog statues, etc. And to top it off, basically 80% of Japanese customs, traditions, and food came from other countries. Japanese is an integration of different cultures like America. Japan takes influences from places like Korea, China, Russia, and Europe. If Japan stuck to itself, there would be no tempura, Japanese tea, tea ceremonies, kabuki, Japanese bread, Japanese curry, J-pop, anime, cars, or modern fishing techniques. The picture is not yellow face. They are not making fun of Asians. In fact, it looks like they put extra care and research into their work. The only reason that you have a problem with this is because that little girl is white, and you know that is acceptable on that it is acceptable on Tumblr to crap all over white people. The only racist here is you. That's a pretty strong case. And I mean, look how long it took for them to make that case. Like, several paragraphs, which is partially why Twitter is not really the place to have these types of conversations. It's like it takes a long time to make a case for or against anything a lot of the time, especially if it's a very complicated issue such as this. But I think this person has a pretty good mental image of what a culture is. Cultures originate from interactions between people in different places. It doesn't go anywhere if people are all stuck up about what is and isn't there. Didn't read most of the content of my post. Fetishy, which is an interesting term in this situation. Art of native women, quote unquote, is harmful and needs to stop. You have to make that argument. It's interesting that people just state a lot of these things like it's fact. Like, you have a case to make there, and you need to actually explain why, if you want to convince people. If you're unwilling to actually read what it is I said, I cannot help you. I think this very, very easily responds to what this is. It's funny that they refer to this as a scantily clad woman. I don't even know if this is like, is anyone getting off to this? It's kind of weird. Wait, I didn't even read this part. Fetishizes indigenous women who face the highest incidences of rape in the U.S. How can you? That's kind of a like conspiracy theory almost. Like, because this person is drawing this drawing, this is encouraging people to rape indigenous people. That is a bold claim, and this person has done nothing to try and back it up. No one is entitled to take other people's intellectual properties, whether cultural or personal, without permission. This is the thing. A culture is not an intellectual property. That's not a thing. And even if it was, we have legal stipulations that state that you cannot. Like, now you're making a legal argument about this, and so I can actually respond to this with this legal argument. Like, you take this to court and say, you are using my culture, and that is my intellectual property. They say, okay, where's your have you got a license, eh? Where's your when did you register that this was your intellectual property? uh, and to find out that it was never registered, and also that this was something that was done centuries ago before we even had the laws in place that recognize intellectual property, it's not going to hold up. So this is a bizarre thing to argue. It's like to say that an intellectual property is a culture. Um, it's really not necessarily and largely not true. Um, because it's just it's so much more complicated than that. But just like intellectual property laws and intellectual like copyright is just not something that existed when a lot of these cultures originated. It's not something that you can claim in any sort of a legal sense, morally perhaps. I want, I think that's what this conversation is about. You can have the legal conversation. It is legal, perfectly legal for anybody to draw something like this, even if someone owned something like this. Like, I don't know, let's say that this particular armband and these particular beads were insignias created by um, something uh, like I don't know. Let's say it was like Stranger Things, for example, like a show that was recently created. That it would be their intellectual copyright that these things are theirs, but that because this was entirely created with this as only a specific element, and the rest of this has been painstakingly hand done by somebody else, an artist who's been drawing all of this, then it makes it kind of difficult for you to claim that as your own when it's like, hey, there's a transformative argument for this. So for you to bring up uh, IPs, intellectual property, cultural or personal IPs, it's like regardless if you can't make a legal argument about this. This is transformative. So even if this was something that somebody owned, it's transformative. And let's say it was something that somebody owned. Would it be okay for them to sell merchandise of that IP to other people and for other people to wear that as for a Halloween costume, for example? Um, I dressed up as Hopper from Stranger Things 4 for Halloween. Um, me and my mates all got together and we were going to do a photo shoot, but there wasn't enough light outside, so we didn't end up doing that. But uh, I bought that specifically from Netflix themselves, and even if I didn't, I don't think it would be like, well, not from Netflix. Netflix licensed Spirit Halloween to be able to make a little kit from it, and then I put together my own stuff. So I had an axe and whatnot to sort of go along with that outfit. But it's like, point I'm trying to illustrate with that is that there's like anyone can wear that, even if it is someone's intellectual property, especially considering that they sold it. And there are people within these cultures who sell certain elements of their culture for a profit to somebody else. And if you want to make the moral case that it's not okay for someone who's not part of that culture to be able to capitalize id est in this way, where you are drawing something that is representative of a culture that is perhaps not respectful or not accurate or whatever you want to say, if you want to make that moral argument and say, hey, nobody should buy from this person because XYZ, then, under a capitalist system where, or I don't even necessarily have to say capitalist system, under a system of an exchange of goods and services, they are not entitled for you to buy their stuff, and you are not entitled to say what they can or cannot sell necessarily. There are caveats to that, obviously, but if you want to say, hey, you should boycott this person because they are doing something that isn't good, then you're perfectly within your right to say that. But you should probably, in a moral sense, be making the case. And if people are going to believe you just because you spewed out some crap about how it's funny because it's not even on a moral or legal level, you are not liable for other people's actions. If someone is raping someone, specifically because they have a fetishization of native people, then that's kind of on them. Like, why are you trying to make other people responsible for other people doing terrible things to people? I don't think the term intellectual property works in that context, friend. I'm trying to put it in a way you web denizens will respect or understand. It doesn't. No, I understand what you meant by IP, and it doesn't apply to that situation. You don't understand it, so maybe you probably shouldn't say that. Not yours, the people who it belongs to have asked you to stop. It doesn't belong to them. You cannot make a legal argument, which is what you attempted to do by saying that it was an intellectual property. You can't make a legal argument about that. And your moral argument has been quite weak. What percentage of natives say that they wanted to stop? Only the ones who would profit, or all. If it happens is next step banning tribes from using other tribes style. I think that is the logical conclusion of this, actually. If someone is using Lenni Lenape, for example, they're using some of their customs and their language, their outfits, whatever it may be, and they are not part of that culture, eventually it's going to be like, well, just because you're indigenous doesn't mean that you're Lenni Lenape specifically, so we're not going to allow you to do that because we own that, apparently. I don't think that... I think it's funny that people stake a claim on any general amount of people because they're under this category of indigenous people when those people are in separate categories. I think that's what I was trying to explain with the going back in time example. Those people are in different categories entirely. They don't consider themselves homogenous because they're not. Their cultures are completely different. So it's interesting that people go out there and say, you're appropriating indigenous people, and indigenous people don't like you for doing that. And it's like, okay, who says? Who has the ability on a moral or legal level to speak for the entire indigenous community? And even if you were somehow able to determine that for individual tribes, there's no way that the tribes themselves would be agreeing with each other, especially if you went back in time and was like, hey, what do you guys think on this issue? I don't know if they'd necessarily... I think all of the tribes would be like, okay, so American culture thinks that we are all the same. That's weird. My ancestors think that we're all the same. That's doubly weird. Like, it is interesting that people make these points about these things in this way. It's kind of telling. What does it say? Since this art's getting a lot of hate, yeah, whatever. This particular furry shot himself in the foot. Not in the foot, in the leg. It was kind of funny. But a lot of people got really offended by this. I don't know if this was serious, but it's kind of hilarious. I'm a BIPOC, and I think BIPOC is a ridiculous statement. While we're out here opining and rationalizing positions on things, BIPOC is a ridiculous term because it literally just means anyone who isn't right. Anyone who isn't white is what that term means. I'm a not white person. I'm a BIPOC, and I think white people should stay out of our spaces and culture. I'm a BIPOC, and I think that's a little racist. I should have stayed in the fields. I don't even know what this is saying. I'm kind of confused about this. Not all skin folk is kinfolk. I don't know what this is saying, but it is kind of funny. Let's talk about cultural appropriation. Phew, good thing I'm black and this targets white people for some weird racist reason. I don't need to read this. Not all skin folk is kinfolk, lol. Based on this interaction? Oh, gosh. Oh, I get it. So he's saying that these people are both in the same culture, but that he's gatekeeping, like he's treating, wait, from the same culture. These people are like both non-white, but this person's still racist. I don't even know which side this is taking, so I'm just confused about that. And of course I did the Twitter thing where you like accidentally, yeah, here it is. Do I want to jump into this? I'm like an hour and 10 in. I really wanted to actually do some other things in this stream. But since furries cannot act right lately, let's see if I can speedrun this. Since furries cannot act right lately, act right, assuming that I think this is a moral argument, and hopefully it remains in a moral argument. I think I've read through this. I sort of previewed this. And I'm like, no, I gotta put this in the stream. So I guess I'm finally doing it today. I did an in-depth art thread to some bull meme image circulating around. So about how cultural appropriation is cool or something. I don't think this is a good faith interpretation of whatever meme image you are referring to, but hey, white furries, let's talk about cultural appropriation. I think it's very interesting that you have to specifically talk down to white people about things. Like, this is of course under the assumption, the stupid and unintelligent and false assumption that a lot of Americans have, that for one thing, that race has in America is just white, black, Asian, etc., etc. It's really funny that it's like white and black specifically is targeting people of skin color in particular, and to assume that everybody in those who has X skin color is exactly the same is a racist assumption, and it's very narrow-sighted. America's perspective on race and culture is very narrow, to say the least. So let's see where he goes with this. This hasty art thread will discuss racism, white supremacy, and colonialism. If you get angry when colonized folks, it's really funny to refer to anybody nowadays as colonized, particularly in the United States. I believe that there's probably places that you could refer specific people as colonized. But to say, oh, colonized folks are fighting these things, is really ridiculous, because you personally were not colonized. Nobody came over to land that you owned, or no one barged into your home and said, hey, I'm taking your place, and I'm taking your family name, and I'm taking your everything. I'm taking everything you own, everything conceptually and legally that you own, and I'm colonizing you, and you are going to become a part of my culture now, and you are going to forget everything that you were before. Like, nobody did that to you personally. And if they did, that would kind of be a fundamental violation of your human rights, wouldn't it? But nobody did that to you personally. This is just you being racist. And what I mean by that is you are saying that your ancestors, or people who look like you, who may not even be your ancestors, did something bad to my ancestors. I believe that man must be punished for their own sins, and not for the sins of anybody else. So, simply because one person is white, which is literally just a visual sense of like, hey, this person has light skin, their skin pigment does not have a lot of melanin, the skin does not have a lot of melanin in it, the pigment is that of a lighter color than other people. Like, that is purely I suppose you could call it phenotypical assessment. You are literally just looking at people's race and judging them based off of that, not based off of their ancestry, which you do not know, which is not something that necessarily shows phenotypically, as you can see with people who are, I don't know, they have, I mean, you could straight up be like, the majority of your genes can be traced back to Africa. You could be, 100% African American, and you can still have light skin. And there are people, and they call it colorism. I don't. It's funny because it's not like racism because it's part of the same quote unquote race. Because America has a stupid perception of what race is, but they they say that they're part of the same race, so they can't be racist to each other. But they're judging each other off of color, and it's just as bad. Is an interesting thing. We got the light skins and the dark skins, and it's ridiculous. But what I'm bringing that up for is because this does not show phenotypically. You cannot visually look at someone and just be like, okay, that person's white, because that completely takes that out of you just knock it out of the ballpark where it's like, you have no idea. This is what I'm trying to say. You have no idea who those people's ancestors are, and they might not even know. And even if they were to try and trace, they cannot say with 100% certainty for a lot of the time, because history is a little bit difficult to trace back like that. There's not always corroboration for every single little bit of history that you want to be able to look up. Says it's really quite interesting to judge people off of a very visual assessment, to say I am colonized because my ancestors supposedly would done bad things to your ancestors, when you don't even necessarily know who yours or my ancestors are. You're just saying that because you want to be racist, and you're trying to, at least you're trying to rationalize your opinion, your position on this topic. But I don't think it comes from a good place. What is cultural appropriation? The inappropriate or unacknowledged adoption of elements from one culture or identity by members of another. This is not the same as cultural exchange, wherein the adoption is mutual, equivalent, and respectful. Which is an interesting distinction, but I don't know, I guess we could go with that. Inappropriate, unacknowledged adoption of elements of one culture or identity by members of another. I don't know. Let's see where he goes with this. Personas aren't anywhere near as important as entire minority cultures. Immediately I'd say, why not? That is someone's personal intellectual property. If you were to steal someone else's design for a particular character, then that would be you stealing something. Whereas nobody has a legal, and I suppose this person is going to state, or at least make the claim that there's a moral claim over of a particular cultural elements, but I don't think that this applies in this case. This is an individual's intellectual property. And for you to claim that it is your own is for you to be stealing from someone, whereas someone else's culture, I don't even know if people wearing clothing or utilizing certain customs, I don't think that that's them claiming it as their own necessarily. They're saying someone else did this historically, and I want to do that again as a way to, etc. Well, whatever it is, whatever it may be. Continuing with the persona metaphor, these characters come from, well, somewhere. They're a combination of your favorite species, colors, personality traits, etc. They're a distillation of you and your life experiences. Saturday's a mix of my favorite animal terrier, color red, hair, dreadlocks. Song Saturday Love by Shorel/Alexandra O'Neill. Character Lucio in Overwatch, same goatee. Personal birthmark, mole under eye. Personality friendly, socially conscious. Socially conscious, what does that even mean? Socially conscious. Like, you are conscious of social scenarios around you? Or, like, socially as in, like socially versus politically, like, socially conscious. If that's what you mean by that, that is, like, the most, virtue signaling thing I've seen on Twitter, furry Twitter, or whatever Twitter, in a while. I'm socially conscious, guys. I'm so aware of issues in communities and under racial issues. I'm so aware of that, guys. I'm so conscious. I'm so thoughtful. Give me a brownie, please. A culture is a set of customs born from the environment and political situations of a nation or ethnic group. Nation refers to an ethnic group of shared struggle, not of state. Interesting. So, is America a nation because they're not an ethnic group under this, an ethnic group of shared struggle? So if someone's in an ethnic group, they're not a nation, but an ethnic group of shared struggle, then they're a nation. That's confusing. I don't necessarily see why you have to make that confusing stipulation. For example, a culture's cuisine is based on the local ingredients and the resulting gathering methods. Go back in time and change the ingredients, you change the cuisine. Black furs know what holiday this you eat this for and its meaning. I find this funny because it literally looks, it's like this could be a block of cheese or perhaps a thing of butter. This is something green, lettuce, I don't know, and these are like beans or eyeballs. Like I literally have no idea what this is. I don't know what this is supposed to look like. Um, but I suppose that's because I'm not a black fur, and any black fur would know what that is. What holiday you eat this for and its meaning? It's just, well, if you're a black fur, you should know this. Unfortunately, for many BIPOC cultures, which is literally just people who are not white, which I've been over plenty of times, the assumption of people being white versus not white, or just assuming that all cultures are, all races are homogenous, or that all phenotypical races in particular, which is not really even a thing, are homogenous. Just because you look this particular way means that you are part of a group of people. There are 1.5 billion, well, that is hyperbolic, obviously, but there are a lot of cultures under quote unquote white, the white moniker, but that is a label that has been forced onto white people because they are not dark. For many BIPOC cultures, our environments were goodness sake, irrevocably changed. I don't know why I couldn't. By colonialism, capitalism, and white supremacy. This is a case. This is you're gonna have to make the case for this. Which is I don't think he's gonna do. He's just gonna talk about the results of it. Colonialism. If we're assuming colonialism was I don't know, specifically British colonialism, people going over saying we're going to set up camp over here and we're going to set up an entire settlement over here, and eventually it ended up taking over the entire breadth of the land. I would definitely say that the cultures of indigenous people, indigenous Africans for certain, the environments absolutely were irrevocably changed and not necessarily damaged by colonialism. I would agree with that. Capitalism, I don't know, possibly, if you're referring to capitalism as just a system of exchange where someone can create a business and you go to that business, give them money or whatever else to trade, an exchange of goods and services, as opposed to its opposite where it's state funded or just an attempt by the state to make things free. I don't know. And white supremacy is interesting. I don't know. Can you point to a specific place where people were like, white people? Did people in Britain like this is a genuine question. This isn't like this didn't happen, but like the people in Britain who were coming over say we are white people rather than we are British or we are Spanish or we are whatever. So the Spanish were pretty pale. The British were pretty pale. probably for the most part. I don't know. People in Portugal and France and all of those European countries who were coming over and uh, colonializing. Um, were they doing that to under the moniker of white people because they were kind of on different teams? There were a couple of wars fought to try and stake claim on land. So it's interesting. It's like that colonialism was different than white supremacy. When did people just say, because we have lighter skin than you, we are going to irrevocably change your culture, environment, and etc.? Like I'm wondering where that happened, if there are any particular examples. Indigenous groups were wiped out wholesale. This is not true. If that were true, then you wouldn't be complaining about it, and neither would any other indigenous people, because they wouldn't exist. They were not wiped out wholesale. This is a bizarre claim that many people have just made up. It's like, why are there so many people who can claim that they have native ancestry if there was a native genocide where every single one of them was killed? Wiped out wholesale. Like, a lot of people are, when they make that point, they're saying, there was a genocide. Yes, that, like, for example, the Holocaust happened. That was a genocide, and yet there are still Jewish people around. Obviously, it wasn't 100% of the people. If they were claiming that there was a genocide of native people, then that would be something that you couldn't necessarily disprove by you saying, well, there are still people who from that native population who are around. There are people who have descended from those groups who are still around. They were not wiped out wholesale. But this person is saying that literally every single one of them is gone. So it's kind of a contradiction there. It's kind of interesting. While others survives partially intact. Oh, so you're saying specifically like indigenous groups, meaning like specific tribes, specific ethnic groups were wiped out wholesale. I think that could be said for some groups. I don't have any citations off the top of my head. Once you bring up the group specifically and you have specific stuff to draw that from, is where we end up having an interesting conversation where it's like, okay, let's go into the Aztecs. The Aztecs were wiped out wholesale. No, they weren't. They literally created a completely separate phenotypical race by integrating into the Spaniards' colonial culture. And I don't want to sound like, what's the word? They had kids together, and those kids created a new ethnic group by that interracial mixing. Those groups were not wiped out; they were integrated into. So it's like you want to claim that the Aztecs were completely wiped out wholesale. Well, that's not really true, is it? And a lot of the Aztec people were getting sacrificed to the sun gods and whatnot against their will. So a lot of people were like, "Hey, we're gonna side with the men with the funny hats." These people are like, "Whoa, these people are doing like these insane evil blood rituals with these people who are not consenting to it. We should probably put a stop to that." And the people who were slaves underneath that culture, because that culture had slaves, were like, "Hey, we're going to side with the guys with the funny hats, and we're going to listen to them. They've got this Bible or something. They've got this weird book that says a lot of things that are interesting, but it seems a lot more reputable than the people who are trying to knife us for the sun god." Anyhow, our clothing, hair, food, music, language, and dialectics, customs, and experience can't be separated from this brutality, and it remains like a cast shadow. I don't know if that's necessarily true. Because like you could go back to cultural customs that were historically documented in whatever way through word of mouth storytelling within the culture or by other means, and you could go back and say, hey, they had this thing, this particular custom, they had this particular thing that was there before they were colonialismed. it's like you can sort of separate it from that because it happened beforehand. If those cultures continued and then were affected by the uh, the events that happened afterward, then it may be difficult to show that those things living. I don't know. It's this brutality is vague. It's like where are the general why is it so general? Where are the specifics? Where are the examples that you can pull? Um, Ultimately, our world isn't just, period. That's a very small period, but I think it is there. Our world isn't just, yeah, newsflash. White hegemony is the standard we are forced to compare ourselves to. This is not true. I've already been over why this individual's perspective and many people's perspective of what is white and what is white hegemony is a little bit ridiculous. Um, but it's really not. No one is forcing you to compare yourselves to a standard of white hegemony, whatever that means. Like this is a claim that needs a lot of backing up. This does not follow from what you have previously said. Most white depictions of BIPOC cultures are filtered through whatever white people's sensibilities are. I would need specifics on this. This is another broad claim. We are not asked, credited, or consulted from. This is not necessarily true. Like, I'm sure there is an example of both of these where some people who are not aware of the culture, whether they be under, whether they be native or not, are representing quote unquote the culture in an inaccurate way, or perhaps in an outright disrespectful way. Um, but I'm sure there are just as many examples of that not happening. Our cultures are just aesthetics to play with and make money from, and we get pennies and browbeating in return. This is no exchange. I, I don't know. I think aesthetics are it's interesting that they don't make a lot of money from it and they get browbeaten. That's a mostly a legal term. I forget what exactly it means. Let me look up some definitions real quick. So we got browbeat, which is to intimidate someone, typically into doing something with stern or abusive words, which is also a legal term, I suppose, under the same definition. And then hegemony, leadership or dominance, especially by one country or social group over others. To say that that white people have leadership or dominance over other people is just to assume that these two groups are completely homogenous, which is not true. Um, it's a little bit silly to go out and say that, and I've been over that plenty of times. But especially to say that it's the standard we're forced to compare ourselves to. Who is in charge of the white hegemony? Who is in control of whatever group you're referring to? Specific native people, which is I need to not get sidetracked about that. If that's the standard you're forced to compare yourselves to, who's forcing you to do that? I don't believe that a white hegemony exists. And I would, it sounds like more silly. What do you call it? Conspiracy speak. You're just putting up more conspiracy theories. There's a white hegemony. There's people in control. There are people in power. They're controlling us and they're forcing us to do things. It's like Occam's razor sort of disproves this. It's like, which is more likely, that there's just a majority of white people in America, and you can say whether or not that's a good thing. I don't know. It's a different entirely different thing. uh, different discussion entirely. Is it more likely that there's just more white people who aren't educated about these things, quote unquote white people? I don't, again, don't really agree with the term. Um, or just more people in general? Is it more likely there are more people in general who don't know much about these cultures and therefore don't know how to portray them in respectful ways, or is it more likely that it's just there are a ton of white people, of course, assuming that white exists as a, I don't know. I feel like when people say this, they try to they're trying to say that people in particular groups all think the exact same, which is just not true. Like that, and is a racist concept of obviously. Um, I don't think it's terribly likely that there is a mass of white people. It sounds like the same racist mindset, just a different target where people are going to say, oh, all of the Jews, they got all the power and they're in control of everything and they're pulling all the strings in the background and they're stealing our money and they're making a lot of money because they're greedy and all of that nonsense. Like it sounds like you're just changing the word Jew to white people, and because that is a current thing that a lot of people find acceptable for you to say, it just sounds like you're targeting a different ethnic group. It's not even really an ethnic group. It's just a blanket term used to describe people who look similar. Sounds a little racist to me. Um, but I think all of this is operating under the assumption that you can own culture, and I just don't think that that is a thing that can be owned. It is a product of, as he said previously, uh, local ingredients and resulting gathering methods. That's just an example. Them living in a particular place, their culture is going to derive slightly from uh, them living in that place, them dealing with certain things. A lot of culture wouldn't exist if not for colonialism. Not to say that colonialism was explicitly a good thing, of course not. But that it's a complicated situation. Would we rather bad things never happen to anybody, or would we rather be able to take the good with the bad? I think it's just an incredibly pessimistic worldview. Um, the way I see it, you can't change what happened. Of course, you can spend a lot of time talking all about why it shouldn't have happened or how that it was wrong. But it's better just to roll with the punches and move on uh, than to sort of perceive this giant monster that doesn't exist. That is, it's there and it's grabbing you by the dreads. Like, and aside on hair, namely braids and dreadlocks, the fact that these styles are found outside of black cultures is irrelevant to the reality of hair-based discrimination happening now. The statement hair-based discrimination is the most Twitter thing that has probably been shown on the stream so far. Hair-based discrimination. What does that mean? Black people face professional, educational, social discrimination and a physical assault for these styles. Is that hair-based discrimination? Thus, they are part of the black experience today. Black experience is an inherently racist term. Like, to say that black people all experience the exact same things is just like, come on. This is why I made a video on racial collectivism years and years ago. Years and years meaning approximately 2, I believe. There was 2 years for both of the years that it has been since I made that video. I think it's the last video that I made, but it's really interesting how these people perceive racial groups which aren't even necessarily, like, you can say, oh, black people, they've got dreadlocks. It's like, is that necessarily from Africa? Is that what about Jamaicans and Haitians? Like, they are phenotypically probably they look very similar, but they're not, and their cultures are not the exact same, but they get lumped into black people, and they get told that their experiences are the exact same to other black people, which I don't know if is necessarily what this person's trying to say, but it is interesting. Um, but if people are facing professional, educational, and social discrimination, and even physical assault for wearing certain hairstyles, then that's obviously not a good thing. I don't think uh, anybody's advocating for someone to be physically assaulted for wearing dreadlocks. Social discrimination. I mean, that's just a silly thing to be discriminated against for because you wear a certain hairstyle. Uh, I don't know. I think that just comes back to outgroup homogeneity bias. People just look at others and assume like, oh, all those people wearing those dreads. That's just such a silly thing to do. Like, it's a childish concept, especially like if there are reasons like there are genetic reasons why people wear dreadlocks, or at least why dreadlocks have appeared out. It's like I can't wear dreadlocks because my hair doesn't grow in a way that you know accounts for that. Whereas I don't know, someone who has incredibly straight hair is going to have a different hairstyle based off of their incredibly straight hair. That someone who doesn't have incredibly straight hair is not going to be able to wear that hairstyle in that way. Um, I think that's a bit of a tangent, but face professional, educational discrimination. Um, if you show up to a business and you are unshowered and your hair is a mess, and you claim that that's part of your culture, that's an interesting uh, way to say that you are being discriminated against. Um, and it's not to say that people with dreadlocks have unwashed hair. I don't know exactly how dreadlocks even work necessarily, but I don't think you need to have unwashed hair in order to wear dreadlocks. But um, I'm trying to be general about this. I think that professions often have standards. Like if you show up uh, with dreads and your hair is like super long, and they say, "Hey, you need to have your hair this long, or you have to wear a hairnet in order for you to work in this kitchen in McDonald's or whatever," then that is a standard that that profession has. Um, and if you break that standard, then you're not going to be able to do your job very well, or potentially you're going to involve some form of danger for you or others by you doing that. Um, so there are certain restrictions that you have to meet in order to be part of a profession that are absolutely realistic for you to be in this profession. I don't know what I'm looking at. His head looks abnormally long, and it looks like the dreads are like only at the front of his head, and I can't tell. Like, is it just me, or does he look like a bit of a xenomorph here? Like, is this the other hand of this person? I don't know what I'm looking at. I'm a little bit confused about that. Obviously not like related to um the arguments being made here. But being part of the black experience is just like, oh yeah, no, well, I guess all black people experience things the exact same. They every single one of them was facing professional, educational, social discrimination, and physical assault for wearing dreadlocks because every single black person has dreadlocks. It's like, why are you saying that? I mean, I guess they hedge that a little bit with saying it's part of the black experience, but I don't know. It's just such a weird thing to be like, oh yeah, uh, being furry is part of the American experience. Being fat and going to McDonald's is part of the American experience. Like, people aren't going to necessarily be happy with you saying that it is one entire quote unquote lived experience that people go through, and they all share that in common with each other. It's a little bit silly. So to the white furs. When you make art of a minority culture, it is your responsibility, I suppose this is moral, this is talking on a moral, not a legal level, to recognize the weight of the struggle that informs those cultures. So how do you do that in a respectful way? Do you just post about it and you're like, hey, uh, black people have previously um, experienced bad things, therefore my art is okay now. I'm getting deja vu. I think that's just my brain firing off and thinking that I've done things before. Anyway, uh, like it does it make it okay if that previous situation, if we looked at her and she had said, "Hey, I understand, and I am currently acknowledging that uh, native cultures have gone through bad things before." I don't think people would still be happy with this. I don't think this is a standard that will be applied evenly. Like, what? How do I apply this standard to my work if I were to do something that involves some other culture? The same care you put into getting all of the markings right on some neon-colored husky is the bare minimum you should put into researching black and indigenous people. Researching black and indigenous people. I have to research people in order. I don't know. That's confusing. See, let's say I wanted to write a story about a character. It would be like it would not help the world building of the story if I said, "Hey, this person is specifically a Lenny Lenape person in this specific time," and then I ended up incorporating some random other things that didn't exist. Like, I don't know, perhaps if that person had, uh, perhaps, I don't know, like a headdress that someone else, that a different tribe had, that they wouldn't have even known about because they're on the other side of the country, something like that. It's like, it would pull you out of the story. The story would not be accurate to those times. And I don't think that's why people are advocating for why it's bad, to sort of have a hodgepodge of all sorts of different cultures as used as an aesthetic rather than a good representation. I don't know. I think I would essentially argue for the same thing, that you should have an accurate depiction of someone so long as it's within its own culture, rather than like, I don't know, if you have some sort of, like, let's say Apex Legends, for example, like uh they've got a lot of things that sort of are reminiscent of other cultures, but they're set far in the future to a point where it's like they wouldn't really be the exact same as they were uh, a really long time back. So wouldn't it's not necessarily something that would make a lot of sense to be like, uh, this is 100% accurate to the how the culture was in this interpretation. I think it's open to interpretation in that way, whereas most stories I think would benefit from you being like, okay, if I'm going to have this person who was part of the Cherokee tribe, and they have all of these Cherokee elements that, the tribal customs or religious beliefs or what have you, are accurate to those people. And then, I don't know, I teleported them into the modern day through some sort of tennis shoes among the Nephites type of thing, where they time traveled to the future, and then they had to deal with their religious beliefs and everything in the future. Like, if you want to tell that story, it would benefit the story immensely to have those be accurate, but I don't necessarily think that it is a morally wrong thing for you to not be accurately showing those. Um, you're drawing stereotypes. Stereotypes aren't our cultures. I don't know if anybody is saying that they are. They're negative caricatures born from white power structures. Not necessarily. A lot of times, negative caricatures are born of a lot of truth. Um, like this, you'd say is a racist caricature. You've got this guy who's like, I don't know, sagging his pants, and he's got a tank top on, and he's got some ice on him, and he's got the gat on him. Is that a thing people say? I've got the gat. He's got a gun on him, and I don't know what the baking soda means. but it's like this is like a stereotypical thug hip what do you call it, gangster man. I don't know, someone from Chicago or like I don't know exactly what this is attempting to depict, but like this is not necessarily born from white power structures. You can find people who act and look like this. Like it's not born from a white power structure. It's born from people making a very hyperbolic caricature is the key term there. Um, like I don't know. People aren't necessarily trying to say. I'm sure there are people out there who are like, oh yeah, all black people are like this. Um, but I don't think that in making a character who is like that, you are attempting uh, to argue that that is something that people are looking like and doing. So it's kind of, they're not flattering us or honoring us. I don't think that anybody would find that flattering or honoring if that is not, if they're like, hey, you're a black guy, this is what you do, right? And it's like, okay, no, there's not at all representative of me or any of the people I know. But maybe this is a hyperbolic example that is to a certain degree representative of certain people elsewhere. To assume, I think the issue that this person has is that they are assuming that all black people are under the same moniker, where it's like, I don't know, if you say that this is like a real, I don't know, maybe, I swear, okay, what am I trying to say? Um, you're assuming that your experiences are universal to all black people, which is absolutely not true and would be a, I don't know, it's a collectivist thing. It's very strange, but it's like let's say this literally just looks like Jesse Pinkman, like, but like let's say that there was someone who lived in a certain place and this was, they were like, hey, that's actually indicative. I see people like this all the time. Maybe I'm like one of these people. Like just because that doesn't represent you doesn't mean that it necessarily doesn't represent another people, and just because it offends you doesn't mean that it offends everybody else who shares the same skin color that you have. Uh, to assume so would be quite racist, I believe. Doesn't matter if the art is rendered realistically, nor if the artist in question is popular. Racism is racism. Now that's the thing. I don't think that that this supposed example is racist of somebody not necessarily understand, like you taking elements from a certain thing and utilizing those a as a an aesthetic is not racism. You are not, I mean, if you want to look up an actual definition of racism, I don't know if this is the good definition or the moving the goalpost definition, but prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group. This one, it's a typically, so it's used typically to talk about one that is in the minority or that is marginalized. But it's typically applied to those situations. This is still a general thing that can be used against. It's a general principle. I don't think that there is prejudice in. Let's just take the example of whatever her name is who drew the wolf with the beads. I don't think there's prejudice in that. I don't think there's anybody being discriminated against. There's no one saying, hey, you shouldn't be in this circle, or that I don't want to talk to you because you are a particular race. Like there's no discrimination, and there's no antagonism. There's not saying, hey, look at this. This is this racial caricature. Look at this wolf that's wearing beads. Like there's none of that involved in that. So yes, racism is racism, but what you are pointing out as racism is not racism. And you probably have a bit of a ridiculous definition of racism that I'm not going to agree with, so we probably would have to find another term that we would have to agree upon definitions, because that's a point of communication. But anyhow, if the furry fandom wants to be a welcoming place for all, white members need to do the work in supporting BIPOC members' abilities to exist as freely as our white LGBTQ members do. I think this principle crumbles when you swap some things. If X group wants to be a welcoming place for all, white people have to change. That's interesting. That's an interesting statement. Like, I feel like this has probably been said by other people, just applying it to different targets. This is a racist statement. You are saying that I think this is both prejudice and discrimination. I don't know if you can necessarily call this antagonism, but you're saying that white people have to specifically change their behavior in order to make a situation inclusive. And not because the behavior itself is discriminatory, but, well, I guess it is. I guess it is a sound argument if it's not a I guess there's no contradiction there. You're saying that white people are doing something that is bad, therefore white people have to do something that is no longer racist. They have to do something that is not racist because they are doing something racist, so they have to change what they're doing. My issue is that it's not racist, and that's my assertion. That's my rebuttal. Ultimately, this isn't a call for censorship. I think it's a call for censorship in a non-legal way. It's called to start drawing us respectfully for the first time. I don't think it's been done. I think it's been done plenty of times before this. You just don't have any examples to show. For the first time, we're going to be drawn respectfully. It's like, no. Like, find examples, because, oh, you tried to hide what you actually ended the thread with. Oh, I didn't know this. But yes, this is a call for censorship. If not legally, then culturally. You're trying to say that people should be policed in a cultural way. People that people should be criticized, censored, bullied into not being able to draw something because you don't think that thing is good. But you deleted this. Finally, for those who never cared and have been telling BIPOC creators off, you were telling white people off. Like, you were telling everyone else who isn't white, because you're collectivist and all you care about is these particular groups. So you're telling people off. It's like people can tell people off. You're telling people off. There's nothing necessarily wrong with telling people off if they're doing something wrong. But you are talking down to people because they are white and because they're not part of some groups that you in particular have decided are special or something. I don't even know exactly what the hang up is, and I guess that's a bigger, broader argument about collectivism. But willingly continue to make and consume art you know is a problem. I don't know it's a problem. You've not proven that to me. Like, that there are many an argument against what you have stated. I don't know it's a problem. You know it's a problem, and that's your problem. You are perceiving that something is a problem, and other people are like, no, I don't see the problem. Lay down in a bus lane or something, lol, thanks for reading. Like, it's just like, yeah, if you don't agree with me, 12-hour shadow ban. I had to press a button that deleted the tweet in recognition of a ban. Basically, check this box here to say you read the TOS kind of deal. It's okay, I know what I drew. So you're doubling down on this? Do you think people should kill themselves if they don't agree with you? Is essentially what that is. No. Yeah, yeah. As a German guy having an ancient Egyptian persona and trying to keep him authentic, I would actually love to see some respectful pictures of black characters, etc. I have no clue about what not to do, but what is actually good to do? Yeah, this is a good question. Just draw black characters, but don't follow the stupid stereotypes that exist about black people. I mean, a stereotypical representation of someone can be accurate. You can say, "Oh, Americans, they're fat and they go to, um, and they go to McDonald's all the time and they complain a lot." It's like that's not necessarily an inaccurate representation. It doesn't represent all Americans, but it could absolutely represent a certain amount of people who fall within those uh, parameters. There are people like that who exist. So it's like, oh, don't draw caricatures of anybody who is in any particular group is kind of an interesting thing. Read and learn about Egyptian culture and do it as best as you can. You are human because grammar. You are bound to trip and fall sometimes. It isn't a crime, and don't tell people to unalive themselves. That's a bad thing. Yeah, well. See, that is one thing, because to tell someone to kill yourself, is that protected under freedom of speech? That's an interesting thing. That's funny, but I mean, it takes a long time to rationalize a position on stuff. So I don't. It's okay to draw your characters however you want. Don't let bad actors decide your character. This is okay. This is okay. I think, yeah, this is probably the image. Cultural appropriation is cool or something. I suppose in cool it means morally okay. I'm guessing that this is the thing that he's referring to, but this is a moral argument. It is okay to draw your characters however you want. Uh, Morally, people can't tell you what to do. I guess that's what it's saying. I don't know. I'm still not even sure where I like. It's protected under freedom of speech, but on a moral level, I kind of separate from this issue. I'm just like, I don't really care. I'm very heavily for freedom of speech, so I don't really mind if somebody paints all Americans as looking like this, or paints all British people as looking like this, or slander. People use slander in a way that it is not mean nowadays. Um, but it is interesting that people bring this up in this way. I'm not sure where I lie on it. I don't really care if you draw what you want and say what you want, so long as it's not illegal. I don't really necessarily have a problem with it. I guess you'd have to find something that specifically offends me, and I don't know. Even though like I would have to be like, okay, you are within your right to draw this thing, but it offends me because I'm part of this particular group. So you should probably be a little more respectful in this way on a moral level. I don't know. Well, I guess that's that. Um, Goodness, I actually went for 2 hours doing that. I didn't expect that to actually be the case. Um, so I don't know if I want to keep streaming or if I just want to chill. It's very hot in here, so I'm probably just gonna end the stream. I didn't actually expect to do an entire stream where I just sat here and opined for so long. But I guess that's that. Um, I wanted to play some Isaac and maybe some Outlaws. So maybe I'll stream again later on. I do have to get to bed by hopefully by at least 12. I have to get up work at 7:30 a.m. But I suppose that's it for now. Didn't think I would actually just have a dedicated stream do this, but it's a little bit better because then it's like, yeah, it's not. I don't have to timestamp it and be like, oh, this is when I actually play the game. If you're in the game playlist or whatever. Anyhow, I suppose that's that.